The weather has been unseasonably warm where we live here in the UK. Very hot weather, very little rain. I've noticed that the elderflowers came out about a month earlier than normal, and that has meant that the elderberries are out now, which is also about a month earlier than normal. I'm usually harvesting elderberries in early September to make elderberry gummies and elderberry syrup, but they have been going strong since early August here, which is quite something. I am pulling them off and making elderberry syrup and gummies, but freezing them to be able to pull them out in late September, early October when cold and flu season hit. The first step of making elderberry gummies is to make the elderberry syrup, and so that is what we're doing now. The first thing to do is to wash any fresh elderberries that you're using and then spend a bit of time removing the berries from the stems. The stems and the seeds in elderberries can be irritating to your body, and so I spend a bit of time removing the berries from the stems. If you're interested in other simple herbal remedies that are good for colds and flus for the wintertime, I've put together a guide with a variety of tinctures that you can make using ingredients that are usually available in the autumn time to forage. The recipes are written for beginners. All are great for supporting your immune system during cold and flu season. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link where you can buy it down in the description below. After you wash your berries, you'll add them into a saucepan. So for this recipe, I use 1 cup of dried elderberries or 2 cups of fresh elderberries. Cover the berries with 3 cups of water. I also like to add a teaspoon of cloves, a teaspoon of cinnamon, or one to 2 cinnamon sticks. And then you put this saucepan with all of those ingredients onto the stovetop on a low simmer, and you let it simmer away until half of the water has evaporated. While mine is simmering, I am going to do a few things. I have been making a calendula infused oil because I have a child who has very sensitive skin. The calendula oil has been soothing for them, but we're almost out. And so I have a jar that I've been letting steep for, I think, maybe 6 weeks or so. But I've just harvested a few more calendula from our garden. We have a small raised bed garden with some calendula growing in it, and so I'm just going to take the petals off of those flowers, which I've let sit out to dry just a few days. It hasn't been, until they're totally dry. I've let some of the moisture evaporate. I'm going to take those petals off and put them into the oil. It's good to let the moisture evaporate from fresh flowers before putting them in oil because the water content in the petals can make the oil go rancid. So I just tend to let the petals sit out for a few days, so most of the moisture is evaporated. I'm going to top it up with a bit more oil to have everything covered and then give it a shake. And I'll let this sit for a few more weeks and then strain it off and put that into our amber glass oil dropper bottle that we keep and use it on our skin. I'm also going to crumble up some mullein. I stumbled across some mullein growing in a community garden recently. Took a few leaves from a few plants and have set them out to dry. I have this little cardboard box that I dry things in. It's not ideal, but I don't have much space in our flat to have like a drying rack or anything, so I just use what I have and put the plants that I want to dry in the box and set it in our pantry and let them dry for, a few weeks. And the mullein is totally dry and crispy, so I'm just going to crumble it up and put it into a glass jar. I will use the mullein to make a tincture. Mullein can help with clearing chesty coughs, help with colds. It's a tincture that I like to have in the winter as well. I actually have one in the pantry that has been steeping for probably a month. I will strain that off here in a video coming up. So I've put the melon into a glass jar. I'm just crumbling it as much as I possibly can because I want the pieces to be really broken up before I tincture them, so a lot of the plant material is exposed to the alcohol. I'll probably try to fill this jar all the way to the top and then make a tincture with it. So I'll need to go back and get a few more leaves, it looks like. The elderberry syrup has been simmering away. Mine was on a bit of a high heat here, but you would definitely want to simmer instead of really have a rolling boil like mine. I'm going to let it cool down slightly and then take it off the stove after half of the liquid has evaporated and then strain it off. You want to use a wooden spoon or something to squish more of the liquid out of the berries. I just use a whisk, which obviously isn't ideal. It's what I had in front of me, so I just used that. Then you want to measure off 1 cup of the elderberry syrup, and this is what we'll use to make the gummies. The next step is to add the beef gelatin. I'm using 1/4 cup of beef gelatin, and then I'm putting it into the warm liquid, letting it sit there for a minute or so, and then whisking it in. I actually put it back on the stovetop to make sure it's totally dissolved. And then take it off again and let it cool down slightly, and then add the raw honey and stir it in until it's totally incorporated. You want to add 1 cup of sweetener, so 1 cup of raw honey or maple syrup or sugar, and then whisk that in until it's completely dissolved and incorporated. If you are using raw honey, try to avoid heating it on the stovetop because you'll kill off some of the beneficial compounds. But if you're using sugar and maple syrup, it doesn't matter as much. You can use some heat to help dissolve it into the liquid. So then I use a dropper to add the liquid into my silicone molds for gummies. I recently bought these molds because it makes it more fun for my kids to have the gummies because they're in a little shape. But what I used to do before is just pour the liquid into a glass Pyrex dish, like baking dish, put it in the fridge, and then use a knife to cut out the gummies. So I didn't have to buy a silicone mold, I just used what I already had. So you can easily make these without actually buying the molds. If you are using a silicone mold, I would recommend putting something solid underneath it before you start filling it, because when it's totally full with the liquid, it's really difficult to pick up and put into the fridge without spilling everywhere. So if you have a small cutting board or a baking sheet, I would recommend putting that under the mold before you start filling. Put them into the fridge for an hour or so, a few hours, and then you should be able to just pop them out. They're nice and squishy. You can store them in the fridge for a few weeks or so, but what I prefer to do is put them in a glass container and freeze them, and then pull out a week's worth when I need them. Because this recipe makes about 50 gummies, depending on the size of your gummy mold. We normally take 1 to 2 a day. Obviously, if you're trying to give these to a child, you shouldn't give children under 1 year old honey. So just know that. I hope you give these a try. It's a really simple recipe. It might seem overwhelming, but once you make it once, you realize it's pretty straightforward, and it's a great way to be able to consume the benefits of elderberries. I've linked the full written recipe in the description below in case you want to bookmark that and refer back to it.